Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Wendy and Fiona for organizing this event, and also thank IFNS for this opportunity so we can share our research work. Uh, oops. So, sorry, I lost my. So actually, I would like to talk about our research work on natural polymers because I have a background in polymer science, and our research focus on developing natural polymer-based functional materials. So today, I would like to talk about how we link natural polymers with antimicrobial food packaging. First of all, I would like to talk about a little bit about the biopolymers or natural polymers. So nowadays you hear a lot about the biomass. Those are the organic matters available on a renewable basis. So like the plants, animals, microorganisms. And we also talk about the polymers. Polymers, they are large molecules. For example, those plastics we use every day, those are made by humans, so they are synthetic polymers. And most of them are not biodegradable. But at the same time, those biomass, those plants and animals, they can also synthesize polymers. And we call those polymers as biopolymers or natural polymers. For example, cellulose, lignin, starch, chitin, chitosan, protein, all those are natural polymers. So actually we have a lot of different kinds of natural polymers, and each of them has different structure and also functionalities. So actually, those natural polymers are very useful raw materials for different applications. So in our former research work, we try to use natural polymers to develop different types of materials. For example, we use spinning technology to make nano or microfibers, and they can, some of them are even edible, and we can use them as a delivery system or wood heating material or for filtration. And we can also use to apply a high shearing force like homogenization to make them into particles. And those particles, they are edible and they can protect those bioactive compounds like vitamins. And then we can encapsulate those bioactive compounds and use those particles as functional food additives. We can also use some thermal technology to convert natural polymers into bioplastics, like a film, like a capsule. So later on, those materials are biodegradable, so we don't need to worry about their degradability in the nature. We can also use natural polymers to make a three-dimensional network and holds water and again bioactive compound inside. Those are the hydrogels. So actually we can have different applications. And at McGill, one of our research work, we focus on food packaging. And for this part of work, we would like to address two challenges. The first challenge is about food waste and food safety. So as you know, we have those microorganisms, bacteria, and sometimes those oxygen, moisture, those things can cause food spoilage. And also another thing like the best before date, that's something we see on the packaging and tell you don't eat it after this date. But actually the consumers don't know how those food qualities change. So the food product we produced, about 1/3 of them are not consumed and they become the waste. And we are thinking if we can use new packaging materials like active packaging and intelligent packaging to extend the shelf life and also show more information to the consumers. So we can reduce the food waste and we can also improve food safety. And another challenge we would like to address is those synthetic plastics. Again, we hear a lot about those synthetic plastics, the pollutions caused by those plastics in the ocean everywhere. So actually, a lot of those synthetic waste is from, food packaging. And if we can use those natural polymers to make biodegradable materials and to partially replace those synthetic polymers, and we can therefore reduce the total amount of those non-degradable plastics. So one starting material we choose is cellulose. Cellulose is actually the most abundant natural polymers on Earth. And at the very beginning, we try to get cellulose from wools, from cotton. But later on, some audience, they ask me, we have so limited amount of wools, and cotton is also expensive. So why we want to use those things for food packaging? So that's why in recent years, we can see more and more research works. We try to get cellulose from the waste material, for example, coconut shell and those husks, those leaves. Actually, all those things, they contain certain amount of cellulose inside, and actually people don't eat or use those waste. So those raw materials, they can provide cellulose, and at the same time, they are very cheap. But another question is, how can we use cellulose? Cellulose is different from those synthetic plastics. Cellulose you cannot heat it up and form a certain shape. So in order to use cellulose to make different types of material, we need to dissolve them to form a solution, and then use a solution to make a film, for example. So here are some common solutions we can use, like the viscose process. That's a commercial method, but it can cause environmental issues. So nowadays, we try to develop new eco-friendly solvent. For example, what we are using in our lab is bottom to the sodium hydroxide urea and the sulfuric acid aqueous solution. We choose those two because they are aqueous systems, so it's cheaper and also it's easy to operate. So just a little bit more information about those solvents we are using. For the sodium hydroxide urea water, we can dissolve cellulose very quick, and it happens in 5 to 10 minutes, and we can enlarge the production, like the industry scale production. This method was invented by my PhD supervisor, Professor Lina Zhang at Wuhan University in China. So after we dissolve cellulose, we can get transparent solution. After that, we can use the solution to make fibers, for example. And we can also make films, transparent films, or the hydrogels. That's very convenient. Another solution we can use is sulfuric acid. Again, we just use sulfuric acid and water. What we need is a relatively low temperature. So if we put cellulose in the solution, we can get, again, transparent solution. So we can see under the microscope, we can see cellulose can be dissolved quickly. With this method, we can also make the transparent films, for example, and the property of this film is quite good. It's comparable to the commercial product like the cellophane. The mechanical properties are comparable. And besides the dissolution, what else? We still have other methods to use those cellulose waste. For example, we can generate nanocellulose from those waste material. So nanocellulose, that's tiny particles like this. The length is about 100 nanometer. The diameter is about 10 nanometers. Actually, those nanostructures is synthesized by nature, by those plants and animals. What we need to do is we can use mechanical or chemical methods to separate those nanostructures. And then later on, what we can do, we can use those nanostructures for example, some food applications. We can make a pickering emulsion. we can use those nanocrystals to reinforce food packaging material. We can add them into food product as a food thickener. So in our lab, we use all those methods. We try to recycle those cellulosic waste. For example, we choose waste paper, waste textile, or even the cigarette filter. That's a cellulose derivative. We try to convert them into functional materials. So for example, with waste paper, we can dissolve them and to use the solution to make films like this. And we can also use a cellulose solution to make something like a straw. So this straw is more like a plastic. It's different from the paper straw you see in like A&W. So this one is looks like a plastic and it's quite stable in water. That's our student project. And we also use waste paper to make beads. Those are the cellulose hydrogels with porous structure. So we can use those beads to reserve water, for example. And with the textile, that's another waste material, but it also has abundant amount every year. And with those waste textile, we can generate nanocellulose. And we can also make cellulose films from those waste textile. For the cellulose derivatives, we can also, for example, use electrospinning technology. That's something can convert polymers into nano-sized fibers. So we can use this kind of nanofibers, for example, as absorbents, as a filtration membrane. And today I would like to talk about some work related to antibacterial materials. So we have 3 different strategies to build up these antibacterial packaging materials. So the first strategy is, as we mentioned, we can dissolve cellulose, and then we can convert them into a film or a hydrogel structure. So we dissolve cellulose and then we cast it or spread it on a smooth surface, and then we can neutralize the solution, so it will come back from the solution to the film structure. So in what we can use t-shirt, we can use bed sheet, we can use jeans, and we dissolve them, we can get cellulose films. So once we get the cellulose film, it's in the water and it's wet. So actually, they have a porous structure. They look like a hydrogel film. So we can use this porous structure to load antibacterial compound to make an antibacterial packaging. We also dissolve waste paper into the solution and get the cellulose films. And after that, it's very easy to load those antibacterial compounds. We can either directly add those compounds in the solution. If they are stable in the alkaline or in the acid, we can directly mix it with the solution. Or if it's not stable in a harsh condition, we can immerse our cellulose film in the antibacterial compound solution. For example, in this work, we just immerse our hydrogel film in the zinc oxide solution and the essential oil solution. And after that, we just dry the film to get the antibacterial material. And after that, we can see those materials, they have very good antibacterial capacity. And at the same time, they are made by cellulose. So those films are totally biodegradable. That's the first strategy. The second strategy is we use nanocellulose to make antibacterial filler to the packaging materials. So we can use a chemical method to convert the waste material into nanocellulose. And after that, those nanocellulose, they are very tiny. So as I mentioned, the length is about 100 and 200 nanometers, and the diameter is about 5 to 10 nanometers. So after that, what we can do, we can modify the surface of those nanocellulose. For example, we can have different functional groups on the nanocellulose. And after that, we can link compounds on those nanocellulose. For example, we use rose banga, that's a natural compound, and it can generate ROS under the light. So we link rose banga on our nanocellulose, and after that, it's a kind of nanofiller. We can add those nanofillers to different materials. For example, we can add them into a film structure. We can get antibacterial film. And if we add them into fiber, we can get antibacterial fiber. After that, we can see we put those materials under the light. They can show certain amount of capacity to kill those foodborne bacteria. And the third strategy is we can make mechanobactericidal nanostructures. So in the first two strategies, we need to combine with antibacterial compound, and actually we link those compounds with our cellulose materials. But in the third strategy, we don't need those antibacterial compounds. We just play with nanostructures, because some researchers, they found on some natural structures like the wings of insects, there are this kind of nano pillars on the surface of those structure, and those nano pillars, they can prevent the attachment or the growth of bacteria, because those nano pillars, they can either physically break those bacteria or to increase oxidative stress inside of the cells to kill the bacteria. So we are thinking if we can make those nanostructures on our food packaging, so we can physically kill those bacteria. And for this work, we don't need those antibacterial compounds, so it's even safer. And we have some preliminary data, so hopefully we can publish very soon. So anyway, the take-home message is actually natural polymer is a very useful raw materials, not only the cellulose, but also the other polymers like protein, like arginate. So they have a lot of advantages, and in many cases, we don't fully use those natural polymers. So recycle of those, we can recycle those natural polymers from the waste, from the byproducts, and it can relieve our environmental pressure. And at the same time, we can also make a useful product from those natural polymers. And but at the same time, we also need to consider a little bit about the feasibility, because sometimes if it's too difficult to recycle, then we need to consider the cost. But so far from as you see, if we use those like the waste paper or the waste textile, it's a good choice for the food packaging materials. So finally, I would like to introduce a little bit about our lab. So our lab locates on McGill's McDonald campus, and is in West Island of Montreal Island. And I would like to thank my students and our postdoc and the visiting scholar for their work, because our lab is relatively new, and we started in 2018, but so far we have those advanced equipment, so we can make nanofibers, we can make thermoplastics, and we can test their properties like mechanical properties and permeability in our lab. So I also would like to thank those funding agencies and strategic clusters for their financial support, so we can have this advanced lab on my campus. I'm looking forward to those all kinds of collaborations. So if you would like to have a further discussion, so feel free to let me know. And thanks for your attention.